with everybody's microphone there?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tim McGinty, the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor. 4 years ago, I retired to run for County Prosecutor to make our criminal justice system more transparent, professional, and accountable. I believe that greater openness would reduce the errors that cost lives. One promise I made was to fundamentally change how cases are handled when a police officer kills a civilian, to end the traditional system where the prosecutor privately reviewed police reports, then decided if an officer should be charged. That secrecy, which appeared arbitrary without a public investigative report, undermined community confidence. It was clear we needed a more rigorous, independent investigation of police use of deadly force cases. Although not required by Ohio law, I now have all evidence reviewed, not just by the prosecutor in these cases, or this office, but by the citizens of the grand jury sitting as an investigative panel. They hear all the evidence and make the final call. Our office also shares with the public completed independent investigative reports so that there will be no mystery about what occurred or rumors in a citizen's death. This transparency gives our community an opportunity to correct errors in policy, training, tactics, hiring, equipment far more quickly, instead of waiting sometimes years until the opportunity and enthusiasm for reform are lost. The lessons are forgotten. Here, we want the lessons learned and applied. That is why what we have done and we will do in all 20 use of force cases that have come to this office in the past 3 years. Today, a Cuyahoga County grand jury completed its thorough investigation of the fatal shooting of the 12-year-old Tamir Rice on December 22nd, 2014 at the Codell Recreation Center. Based on the evidence they heard and the law as it applies to police use of deadly force, the grand jury declined to bring criminal charges against Cleveland police officers Timothy Lohman and Frank Garmbach. That was also my recommendation and that of our office after reviewing the investigation and the law. A short time ago, we informed Tamir's mother of the grand jury's decision. It was a tough conversation. We again expressed the condolences of our office, the sheriff's detectives, and everyone else who has worked so diligently on this case, and our sincere wish that these events on that traumatic day at the Codell Rec Center had unfolded differently. She was broken up, and it's very hard. We explained to her that this was a difficult decision also, but that to charge police, even a situation what was as undeniably tragic as the death of her son, the state must be able to show that the officers acted outside the constitutional boundaries set forth by the Supreme Court of these United States. Simply put, given this perfect storm of human error, mistakes, and miscommunications by all involved that day, the evidence did not indicate criminal conduct by police. On close examination, especially of what is perhaps the most critical piece of evidence, a very recent enhancement of the surveillance video by an expert laboratory often relied upon by the FBI, it is now indisputable that Tamir was drawing his gun from his waist as the police slid toward him and Officer Lohman exited the car. At the point where they suddenly came together, both Tamir and the rookie officer were no doubt frightened. If we put ourselves in the victim's shoes, as prosecutors and detectives try to do, it is likely that Tamir, whose size made him look much older and who had been warned that his pellet gun might get him into trouble that day, either intended to hand it over to the officers or show them it wasn't a real gun. But there was no way for the officers to know that because they saw the events rapidly unfolding in front of them from a very different perspective. Just minutes before, they had been assigned in order to respond to a Code 1 report of a, quote, guy, end quote, pointing a gun at people outside the rec center. That guy, they had been told, was dressed exactly as Tamir was. As they raced that mile towards the rec center from their other assignment, the police were prepared to face a possible active shooter in a neighborhood with a history of violence. There are, in fact, memorials to 2 slain Cleveland police officers in Edbury Park, a short distance away, and both had been shot to death nearby in the line of duty. Police are trained that it only takes a third of a second or less to draw and fire a weapon upon them, and therefore they must react quickly to any threat. Officer Lohman had just seen Tamir put an object into his waist as they pulled up, and he stood up in a gazebo and started walking away. A moment later, as the car slid toward him, Tamir drew the replica gun from his waist and the officer fired. You'll be able to see an actual Colt 1911 model pistol and a identical replica gun that was used that day. They are very difficult to tell apart, even by people who are very familiar with guns, even when you stand and stare at it. A moment later, as the car slid toward him, Tamir drew the replica gun from his waist and the officer fired. Believing he was about to be shot was a mistaken, yet reasonable belief, given the high-stress circumstances and his police training. He had reason to fear for his life. It would be unresponsible and unreasonable if the law required a police officer to wait and see if the gun was real. The outcome will not cheer anyone, nor should it. Every time I think about this case, I cannot help but feel that the victim could have been my own son or grandson. Everyone here who has worked and investigated this case feels the same way. It brings it all to sadness. Everyone who investigated this case has children who goes to parks and rec centers. No parent follows their 12-year-old around all day to make sure they don't get into mischief. That is why this case taps such profound emotions in all of us. The Rice family has suffered a grievous loss. Nothing will replace Tamir in their lives. The police officers and the police department must live with the awful knowledge that their mistakes, however unintentional, led to the death of a 12-year-old boy. So will the police radio personnel, whose errors were substantial contributing factors to the tragic outcome. They passed along detailed information about the guy outside the rec center, his clothing, including the colors of his coat and his camouflage hat, but not the all-important facts that the 9/11 caller said the gunman was probably, quote, probably a juvenile, and the gun may not be real. Had the officers been aware of these qualifiers, the training officer who was driving might have approached the scene with less urgency. Lives may not have been put at stake. The fact that the Code 1 high priority call about a possible active shooter next to a rec center was based on inaccurate information is a very significant legal fact, but will do little to ease the emotional burdens that the family and all involved must now carry. Our entire community has suffered through gut-wrenching self-examinations and recriminations. When an innocent civilian, let alone a child, is killed by a police officer, it touches the nerves that lie close to the surface of all of us in society. That is especially true since the events in places such as Ferguson's and Chicago have exposed a gulf of distrust and resentment that too often divides police from the very communities they serve. And when the public is kept in the dark about the facts of an investigation into these incidents, that distrust can grow. All those emotions are compounded when a 12-year-old boy is killed on video. But the original grainy video that had been shown repeatedly on TV is only a small part of the story here, a very important but small. That is why this case demanded a professional and dispassionate investigation to determine if this was indeed a tragic crime or a tragic accident. The Supreme Court instructs us to judge an officer's conduct by what he or she knew at the moment, not by what was learned later. We are instructed to ask what a reasonable police officer, with the knowledge he had, would do in this particular situation. The Supreme Court prohibits second-guessing police tactics with 20/20 hindsight. And the law gives the benefit of the doubt to the officers who must make split-second decisions when they reasonably believe their lives or those of innocent bystanders are in danger. Based on these rules, it became clear through this investigation that the actions of Officers Lohman and Garbeck were not criminal. And the reasons for this, Assistant County Prosecutor Matthew Meyer and James Gutierrez have outlined in a written report that will be available online when you leave here. In a few moments, I'm going to ask Assistant Prosecutor Meyer to provide the detailed factual and legal analysis of this case, the improved evidence that we've discussed already. But now, let's deal with it. The death of Tamir Rice was an absolute tragedy. It was horrible, unfortunate, and regrettable, but it was not by the law that binds us a crime. Through this process, we too have heard the chants, and we too want justice for Tamir. But justice would not be achieved by bringing charges that would violate the ethical canons of our profession, because we know these charges could not be sustained under the law in our Constitution. This decision does not mean the legal system is finished with this case. In our country, we have parallel systems of justice, and the civil justice system may yet provide the Rice family with some of the accountability they deserve. But the grand jury lived with this case for more than 2 months, heard all the witnesses, and was there to evaluate each witness's credibility and to question them. In cases where the police used deadly force against the citizens, we now have other citizens review the evidence and make the final call. As a local judge recently said, if you don't trust the grand jury, you don't trust your neighbors. I trust the people of Cuyahoga County to make the final call, and that's why I've changed this procedure. In this case and every other case of police use of deadly force in this county. Now, there have been lessons learned already in this case. That is the plus side of this tragic event. And it should never happen again, and steps have been taken to see it does not. First, the city has bought body cams for all its officers, and that should help greatly. They will know exactly what happened in these situations. Dash cams are on the way for Cleveland Police Department and the suburban departments, in part using the $1 million this office provided from seized and forfeited monies from criminals and criminal convictions. Our goal is to have every police car in Cuyahoga County, including Cleveland and all the suburbs, with dash cams and officers all wearing body cams. It will improve public confidence and improve performance and protects both the officer and the individual. We'll know exactly what happened in the future. And public confidence rises and complaints fall dramatically. It has been shown across the country. The second important event that has taken place since this occurred is the consent agreement between the city and the City of Cleveland and the Department of Justice. That will dramatically change the way the city hires, trains, and manages its police. I once again applaud Mayor Jackson and Council for their leadership on this issue, and Police Chief Williams, who is determined to constantly improve the department, and he has. We have a great chief and a great mayor. And finally, I want to call on the legislature and the manufacturers of toy guns not to make guns that look so much like the real thing. If the color and design of Tamir's pellet gun had screamed toy, then the call that set this tragedy into motion may never have happened. The grand jury has fully investigated this case and made its final decision. Now it is time for the community and all of us to start to heal. We have taken steps to learn. We're going to continue to learn. We're going to continue to improve the quality of the justice system we have here in this county. But before anyone reaches their own conclusions, and everyone's welcome to their own, we ask please to review the facts and evidence this investigation has uncovered. We have issued the report of the Sheriff's Department, and I thank Sheriff Pinckney and Detective Morgan and all the other detectives who worked on this case here, and all the hard work they put in. Look at the report, look at the facts, look at the law. That's why we put the reports out as they come in, so we're not making decisions based on rumors or hearsay or the like. These are actual facts, and we can learn from these facts. I call for the leaders of our community to now respect the process and the decision of the grand jury, and to urge others to express their opinions in a peaceful and lawful manner. I appreciate the sincere emotion and concern of all citizens who have expressed their feelings on this case, and we thank them. We thank them for caring, and I will now turn this over to Assistant Prosecutor Matt Meyer, who is the head of the Public Corruption Unit of our Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. He's a former chief of the Appellate Unit. And Mr. Meyer argued successfully at the United States Supreme Court this spring, and an opinion issued 9-0 this fall in what I consider a landmark case, Ohio versus Clark. Yeah, I thank him. I thank Jim Gutierrez and all the other prosecutors here who have worked on this case, and the other UDFs, use of deadly force cases. We've had many. Just earlier this month, we had 2 police officers within a 3-day period shot in the chest by assailants. Both individuals were killed by other police officers, not the person shot. But this is a violent society with all these guns. This is a tough job, and to investigate these cases, and I thank the individuals who actually do the work. And now we'll hear from Mr. Myers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Oh. All right, thank you. Prosecutor McGinty touched on the legal standard, but it is necessary to frame the discussion with a full understanding of the unique set of laws that apply when anyone reviews a police use of deadly force incident. In a case called Graham versus Connor, the United States Supreme Court said that in any review of a police officer's use of deadly force, the court requires that the incident be analyzed under the Fourth Amendment and its reasonableness standard. Without the Fourth Amendment analysis, it is not possible to determine whether an officer's use of deadly force is or is not a crime. In a case called Tennessee versus Garner, the United States Supreme Court again said that a police officer may use deadly force when the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a threat of serious physical harm to the officer or to others. In the Graham case, the U.S. Supreme Court again said that the reasonableness of the officer's actions must be judged from the perspective of the reasonable officer on the scene and not through the lens of 20/20 hindsight, allowing for the fact that police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. In a recent United States Court of Appeals case for the Sixth Circuit called Mullins versus Cyranak, decided this past November, the court said that in making this judgment, we must be careful not to substitute our personal notions of proper police procedure for the instantaneous decision of the officer on the scene. Rather, we must adopt a built-in measure of deference to the officer's on-the-spot judgment about the level of force necessary in light of the circumstances of a particular case. After all, what constitutes reasonable action may seem quite different to someone facing a possible assailant than to someone analyzing the question at leisure. In a case called Livermore versus Lublin, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals again explained that when reviewing an officer's use of deadly force, we must disregard the events leading up to the incident of deadly force and instead focus on the split-second judgments made immediately before the officer allegedly used excessive force. Turning to the facts of this case, up until now, the focus has been on a short 2-second sequence of video in which a Cleveland police cruiser appeared on the video frame and a Cleveland police officer emerged from the car to fatally shoot a 12-year-old boy. Viewing the video alone, however, provides an incomplete picture of what happened on November 22, 2014. This presentation is therefore meant to provide the public with the full picture of what happened that day and not just one isolated part. This presentation should place the video within the context of all the relevant evidence and to explain the law that governs the review of the officer's use of deadly force in this case. I'd like to begin with an overview of what happened that day. The few hours leading up to the incident set in motion a series of events that helped to explain the officer's state of mind at the time of the shooting. 12-year-old Tamir Rice had spent several hours on November 22, 2014, playing at the Cadell Recreation Center Park with a replica firearm, an airsoft pistol that shot plastic BBs and which closely resembled a Colt M1911 semi-automatic pistol. Tamir had gotten the gun from a friend who told investigators that he had removed the orange tip, the safety tip, that the gun had come with. And we have the model that had been purchased at a local Walmart. And you'll see that, as purchased, this airsoft pistol should have had that orange safety tip to hopefully alert officers that this in fact was a toy. But the pistol that Tamir had that day had no such tip. The investigation revealed that the same friend had warned Tamir about the dangerousness of playing with that toy gun. And I'd like to actually display an unloaded real M1911 alongside Tamir's replica firearm so that you can understand what we're talking about here. And I have here Tamir's gun and the actual M1911, so you understand what we're talking about. And to assist you, we've created a presentation displaying this. And I have here the actual M1911 semi-automatic pistol and Tamir's replica firearm. To any observer, it's extremely difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake gun unless you pick it up or see it being used. To someone who's in a stressful encounter, however, who doesn't know if the gun is real or fake, it is impossible to say which one is real. Tamir's friends knew that Tamir was only 12 years old. He appeared, however, to be much older than he really was. At the time of his death, Tamir weighed approximately 175 pounds. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall. He wore size 36 pants, size 12 shoes, and an extra large men's jacket. All of the officers who saw Tamir on November 22nd thought he was much older than 12 years old, including the officer that called for an ambulance 41 seconds after the shooting, who described Tamir as, quote, in his 20s, end quote. Throughout the afternoon on November 22nd, Tamir would pull the gun in and out of his pants like robbers do, according to a friend who was with Tamir at Cadell Recreation Center on the day of the shooting. Another of Tamir's friends said that Tamir kept the gun inside his waistband with the barrel pointing downward and said that Tamir had to lift his jacket to pull it out. Another adult who knew Tamir and who just recently gave sheriff's investigators a statement said he saw Tamir with the gun on November 22nd and told him to, quote, put the gun up. You can't be playing with a gun like that in this day and age, end quote. Unfortunately, the off-duty police officer serving as a security guard at Cadell on the day of the incident was unable to see the video of what Tamir was doing with the gun outside for 2 hours before the shooting, because the security monitors were kept in a locked office, unavailable to the security officer or anyone else for viewing. That security guard did not have a glimpse of the gazebo area from his vantage point at the Cadell Recreation Center entrance. The 911 caller, who had been sitting at the gazebo for 15 minutes before the shooting, told sheriff's investigators that he had seen Tamir pull the gun in and out of his waistband 5 or 6 times. The security video from Cadell Recreation Center also shows numerous instances of Tamir pulling the gun in and out of his waist and pointing at people during the afternoon of November 22nd. I should say a word about the video. Nearly everyone who has viewed the security video footage from Cadell Recreation Center has described it as grainy, lacking detail, and being hard to see. To assist in our evaluation of that video, we hired Grant Fredericks, an accredited video analyst who works with a Spokane, Washington company called Forensic Video Solutions. Fredericks has been recognized as an expert in forensic video analysis and digital multimedia analysis in courts nationally and internationally. And he teaches at the FBI's National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and he's done so for the past 12 years. So to understand what we're talking about, I'm going to show you some frames from this particular video. And these are all images that Fredericks has prepared. These are not enhanced videos. These are magnified and placed within context of two particular frames at Cadell on the day of the shooting. Camera 1, which was located on a telephone pole facing the gazebo, and camera 4, which was mounted on the building and faced towards West 99th Street, which is the approach that the officers took coming into the recreation center. This first series of videos was taken at 3:08 p.m. on the day of the incident. And you can see Tamir in this magnified portion of camera 4. In Fredericks' notes, you can see the bottom of his jacket. You can see his arms come together. You can see his arms move upwards. And you can see the bottom of the jacket move upwards. And the bottom of the jacket is again visible. In the second series of videos that Fredericks prepared, and this was taken at 3:13 p.m., roughly 25 minutes before the shooting, you can see Tamir standing in the magnified portion outside the gazebo with his left arm moving forward, dark sleeve being visible below the gray jacket bottom. The front right side of the jacket moves upwards. The right arm moves upward to the center of the stomach. The right shoulder moves upwards. Right hand is at the waist. Left elbow is visible. Right arm moves out from the body. And Tamir points the gun. In the third series of videos taken from video 5 that Fredericks prepared, and again these are at 3:12 to 3:23 p.m., shortly before the shooting, you can see Tamir with the gun in his hand outside the gazebo. You can see the right hand move to the center of his stomach. You can see the front of the jacket move up. And you can see when that hand comes back, it is empty, leading Fredericks to conclude that he had placed the weapon in his waistband. Tamir was also pointing the gun at people throughout the day, and at least the 911 caller who did not know Tamir felt threatened by it. And Fredericks provided a slide of what we're talking about. He provides a magnified portion of the video, and this is taken at 1:05 p.m., 2 hours before the shooting. And you can see that he's visible outside the gazebo, pointing the gun at other children. In a second video that he pulled from 1:06 p.m., you can see Tamir pointing the gun directly at the head of another young male. In this series of videos, this was taken at 3:09 p.m. You see Tamir in camera 4 walking just feet away from the recreation center, again pointing the gun at other people as they walk towards the recreation center. Again from video 5, this was taken at roughly 3:13 p.m. You can see Tamir outside the gazebo pointing the gun. And I should note that by this time the 911 caller had arrived at the gazebo and was watching Tamir as he did this. At the precise moment of the shooting, there were numerous people inside and around Cadell Recreation Center, and I'll touch on that in a moment. At 3:24 p.m. on November 22nd, 2014, the 911 caller reported to police that there was a guy with a pistol at Cadell Recreation Center who was pulling out and pointing the gun at people. The 911 caller said that the gun was probably fake and the guy was probably a juvenile, but the guy was scaring the expletive out of him. And I think it would be helpful to hear that call again so you understand what was being said in the context in which it was being said.
Saturday, November 22, 2014, 15:22 and 35 seconds.
Civil Police, Highlander. How are you? I'm sitting in the park at West Boulevard by the West Boulevard West Traffic Station. And there was a guy that held a pistol. You know, he's probably fake, but he's like pointing it at everybody. And where are you at, sir? I'm sitting in the park at West Cuyahoga, West Boulevard by the West Boulevard Rapid Transit Station.
So you're at the rapid station? Are you at the rapid station?
No, I'm sitting across the street at the park.
What's the name of the park? Cuyahoga?
Cuyahoga, yes. The guy keeps blowing it in and out of his pants. It's probably fake, but you know what? He's scaring the shit out of me.
What does he look like?
He has a camouflage hat on.
Is he black or white?
He has a gray coat with black sleeves and gray pants.
Is he black or white?
I'm sorry.
Is he black or white?
It's black.
He's got a camo jacket and gray pants?
Oh, he has a camouflage hat on. You know what that is?
Yeah.
Thrift store. And his jacket is gray, and he's got black sleeves on it. He's sitting on the swing right now, but he keeps pulling it in and out of his pants and pointing it at people.
The significance of this call to a police officer should also be mentioned. The caller provided both a name and a callback number, as well as a specific description of Tamir and what he was wearing, and the fact that he was pulling the gun out of his waistband and pointing at people. And as far as these officers knew, they had probable cause based on that information, because the law defines a tip from a known citizen indicating criminal activity as reliable. And without more, these officers had probable cause that Tamir was committing an offense. And it was appropriate for them to view this tip as reliable because the caller supplied their name and contact information. At 3:28 p.m. on November 22nd, 2014, these Cleveland officers, Lohman and Garmbach, received the call about the guy at Cadell Recreation Center, quote, sitting at the swings, pointing a gun at people, end quote. The dispatchers provided the officers with that specific description, and they described the fact that the man was pulling his gun out of his waist and pointing at people. They did not, however, describe two key facts: that the gun may have been fake and that the man may have been a juvenile. So I want to play a portion of that recording so you know exactly what the officers heard from dispatch and what they responded to.
All I have is Charlie 2-1.
And 2-5, we'll take it. The alarm check's okay.
That's Officer Lohman.
All right, thanks. Charlie 1, you can disregard them. It's at Cadell Rec Center, 1910 West Boulevard, 1910 West Boulevard. Scott calling. He said, in the park by the youth center, there's a black male sitting on the swings. He's wearing a camouflage hat, a gray jacket with black sleeves. So he keeps pulling a gun out of his pants and pointing it at people. Code 1, that is 8418, 8418. How many calls are you getting for that? Just the one so far from Scott.
The Code 1 call is the highest.
All I have is Charlie 2-1.
The Code 1 call is the highest priority call that the Cleveland Police Dispatch System uses, and it signifies a great risk to the public safety. And both these officers were aware of that fact. Officer Garmbach was a training officer assigned to train Officer Lohman, who had recently completed the Cleveland Police Academy and been sworn in as a Cleveland police officer. Garmbach was responsible for instructing Officer Lohman and was in charge of the two-man patrol car that both men were in at the time of the incident. After receiving the call, Officer Garmbach drove down West Boulevard from their prior call at St. Ignatius Elementary School in a minute and a half, arriving at West 99th Street adjacent to Cadell at 3:30 p.m. Officer Garmbach chose to enter the Cadell Recreation Center from a dead end at West 99th Street because it gave him quick access to the swing set area where dispatch had said the officers would find the suspect. The investigation revealed that this route was commonly used by 1st District officers because it avoided the wooden posts that blocked their entrance to the area from the Cadell parking lot. It also gave them quicker access to the swing set area where, as I said before, the officers believed they would find the suspect. Officer Garmbach also said he used this route to block the suspect's access to Cadell Recreation Center. At the time of the incident, as you can see here, Cadell Recreation Center was full of children and adults. This camera shot was taken at 3:22 p.m., the exact moment that Officer Lohman fired at Tamir Rice. There's approximately 20 people who can be seen in this gymnasium, whose entrance is 200 feet away from the gazebo where the incident occurred. This shot was taken at the same time, and this is the main entrance on the north side of Cadell Recreation Center, around the corner from the parking lot. And there are 5 children who can be seen outside of Cadell at the precise moment that Officer Lohman fired his weapon. During the 10 minutes before the incident, numerous children and adults were seen in and around the Cadell grounds, which would not have been unusual on a Saturday afternoon. And I can show you what I'm talking about here. These images, again, were all taken from the Cadell Recreation Center security cameras. And these are all within 10 minutes of the shooting incident. Officer Garmbach's route and tactics do fit within the Cleveland Police Department's active shooter policy, and I should explain what I mean. After Columbine, police departments throughout the country recognized that an older model of dealing with active gunmen in public places that required for waiting until backup arrived and for specialized SWAT teams wasn't working. By the time they got there, innocent people were already getting killed. Instead, departments around the country adopted a new model that allowed for the first officers on the scene of an active shooter or potential active shooter to quickly confront and eliminate the threat posed by a gunman in a public place. Cleveland's policy, which was adopted in 2011, defined an active shooter as a suspect whose, quote, use of a firearm is causing or attempting to cause immediate death and or serious physical harm in a well-populated area, a target-rich environment, such as the school, church, business, or any other public place. The policy authorized, quote, officers responding to an active shooter incident to have the authority and shall attempt to make immediate contact with and stop the active shooter. Here, Officer Garmbach, based on the information given to him by dispatch, had a reasonable belief that he faced a potential active shooter because he had an apparently reliable report of a man with a gun at a rec center filled with children and adults, pointing the gun at and threatening people. His decision to enter quickly and confront what he thought was a gunman would be exactly what we would expect an officer to do had this been an actual active shooter incident. We expect that officers would risk their lives to confront a gunman threatening innocent people at a recreation center. These officers, however, had not been given critical information, which would have reduced their risk evaluation of this incident and called for different tactics. It is clear that had these officers known this was possibly a child and the gun was possibly a toy, they would not have considered this incident to have been so serious and almost certainly would have used different tactics. Now, getting to the actual encounter, from the time that Officer Garmbach drove past the West 99th Street dead end to the point that Officer Lohman shot Tamir, the entire incident took 10 seconds. BCI reenactment using a laser scan of the scene shows that both officers would have had a clear vantage point of the gazebo once they had passed the swing set, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. This video was taken using a laser scan of the incident in April. And although the trees have come out, which they would not have been in bloom in November, it gives you an approximate understanding of what the officers would have seen as they approached the gazebo. And you'll see as the angle of view comes down, you'll be adjacent to the West 99th Street dead end. And the computer will scan you forward towards the gazebo, again approximating what these officers would have seen. So at this moment, the camera angle is passing the elementary school and moving towards the gazebo. There is a barrier at the end of West 99th Street, but it is easy for an officer to simply drive around that barrier and proceed into the park on the grass. The dispatcher told these officers they could expect to find the suspect here at the swing sets. And as the officers approached, their angle and their gaze was directed here because that's where they thought the threat was. It wasn't until they had confirmed there was no one at the swing sets that they noticed Tamir sitting right here at that third table under the gazebo. And as they pulled up, this is what they could have seen. And that ends the reenactment. From the statements to the fellow officers and to the Sheriff's Department, we know that both officers looked for the suspect at the swing sets and didn't find him. They looked to the gazebo and clearly saw a suspect fitting the exact description they had been given by dispatch. Officer Lohman says he saw Tamir get up and put an object into his waistband. Based on the information he knew at the time, he would have had reasonable grounds to believe that the object was a gun. Both officers saw the suspect initially step north away as they approached, and this led Officer Garmbach to believe that the suspect was going to run. The officers then saw the suspect quickly change direction and step directly to the spot where the officers would intersect with the suspect, causing Officer Garmbach to brake suddenly. Due to the wet conditions, with snow, mud, wet grass, and fallen leaves, Officer Garmbach's cruiser went into a skid and did not stop anywhere near where he had intended. The State Highway Patrol accident reconstruction indicated that it would have taken Officer Garmbach between 3.5 and 4.5 seconds to stop. Grant Frederick's video analysis shows what happened as Officer Garmbach's cruiser slid to a stop in front of Tamir. You can see Tamir as he approaches the officers, and Frederick's notes his right hand is in front of his body. And this is slide 118 of his 6 video series, the moment of the incident at 15:30:20. His right hand is in front of his body, according to Fredericks. Police vehicle is moving forward. Tamir's right arm moves towards his waist. He moves forward and lowers his arm to his waist as the passenger door opens. Tamir's right shoulder and arm move upward, and his jacket bottom lifts upward, and Lohman exits the vehicle. And you can see this brighter point of contrast. That is Officer Lohman's hand with his gun drawn. And Fredericks indicates, according to his report, that at this point Lohman has already fired and Tamir is reacting to the gunshot. Officer Lohman fired his weapon twice and he hit Tamir once. According to trace evidence reports, Officer Lohman was within 4.5 to 9 feet of Tamir at the time of the shooting. I should say a word about this video. This camera that captured the scene was a camera that recorded in very poor quality with what is called a variable frame rate. And the reason that's important is because it's not collecting information at a consistent rate, and it's only capturing 1 to 2 frames per second. So unfortunately, there is a large amount of information that is simply lost. We do not know what happened in those frames that we cannot see. Mr. Fredericks concludes in his report, and I should note also that Mr. Fredericks is the only qualified accredited forensic video analyst to have given any opinion in this case. At the time of the shooting, Tamir Rice lifted his jacket with his left hand, and with his right hand, he reached for the gun that was located in the waist area of his pants, end quote. And both Officer Lohman and Garmbach gave statements that they saw the suspect pulling the gun. A minute after the incident, Officer Cunningham ran to the scene and spoke to Officer Lohman, who told Officer Cunningham that Tamir, quote, reached for the gun and he gave me no choice. There was nothing I could do, end quote. Officer Lohman made this statement while he was still under the stress of the incident. And in fact, 41 seconds later, when Garmbach summoned EMS, Lohman was clearly still under the stress of the event and could be heard yelling in the background of Officer Garmbach's call. And I'll play that for you so you can hear what I'm talking about.
1529.
Right here.
Radio, shots fired, male down.
I'll play that again for you.
Radio, shots fired, male down. Black male, maybe 20. Black revolver, black handgun. I'm sending EMS this way. In a road, boss. Yeah.
That's Officer Garmbach, who is summoning EMS to the scene. Both officers' post-shooting conduct demonstrates that they saw Tamir pulling out a gun before he was shot. First, Officers Lohman and Garmbach took up defensive positions around the cruiser with their guns drawn, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Immediately after the incident, you can look at the magnified angle here. After Tamir reacts to the gunshot, you watch what happens next. You can see both officers circling the cruiser, and looking at the unmagnified portion, you can clearly see they have their weapons drawn on Tamir even after he has been shot, which signals that both officers saw something that they believed was a threat to their lives, the something being a gun. Second, a dark point of contrast can be seen appearing on the gazebo's concrete floor immediately after Officer Lohman shot Tamir, and I'll show you this again. In this series of slides, you'll see right here where Tamir's fallen a black shape. And what happens next is that Officer Lohman circles the area and he walks up and he kicks that object away. The object was Tamir's replica firearm, which ended up right here on the grass. A Cleveland police officer has placed a piece of plastic there to protect it from the elements. That demonstrates that Officer Lohman, even 41 seconds after the incident, thought he was dealing with a real gun and still felt that he was under threat by Tamir because of the presence of this gun. The first officer who realized that Tamir's gun was not real was several minutes later, when Detective Dan Lentz examined the gun closely. Lentz said that until he saw the magazine and the green BBs, he thought the gun was 1,000% real. Various experts who were not present during the incident itself have given opinions about what they think the video depicts. These experts have suggested that Tamir did not show the officers the gun and had his hands in his pockets when he was shot. None of these experts addressed the fact that the gun fell on the gazebo's concrete floor immediately after Tamir was shot, or why the officers reacted defensively to Tamir and kept their guns drawn on him until Officer Garmbach kicked the gun away 41 seconds later. And the obvious conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, is that Tamir dropped the gun on the concrete gazebo floor because it was in his hand when he was shot. It is unclear whether Tamir could have heard the warnings that Officers Lohman and Garmbach described as they pulled up to the scene. Garmbach believed that the cruiser's windows were up, and Lohman describes giving commands as he opened the door. The video shows that Lohman opened the door and fired his gun within approximately 1 second. Although it is possible to give commands within 1 second, the law only requires that an officer give commands before using deadly force when feasible. Lohman was facing a suspect pulling an object from his waist that he thought was a real gun. The law does not require him to wait until being fired upon to confirm whether the gun is real, or to give the suspect additional time to draw and fire upon the officer. Officer Garnbach's approach, despite intending to stop at a much earlier point, had left Officer Lohman dangerously exposed in a position facing a gunman, or what he thought was a gunman. He did not know whether Tamir would use the gun to shoot him as he exited the cruiser, or whether the vision of Tamir reaching for that gun would be the last thing he ever saw. Lohman and Garnbach both have been criticized for their failure to give Tamir first aid at the scene. This criticism, however, does not fit with the actual evidence or have any bearing on whether the decision to use deadly force was criminal. It's worth noting several points. Cleveland police procedure required officers to summon EMS to aid an injured suspect, which Officer Garnbach did within 41 seconds of the shooting. Garnbach did so only after he kicked the gun away and was convinced there was no longer a threat from that gun. Tamir's sister, in a state of panic, rushed to the scene 1 minute and 23 seconds later, diverting Officer Garnbach's attention and caused him to deal with Tamir's sister instead of Tamir. Meanwhile, Officer Lohman, who had injured himself during the incident by rolling his ankle, was only of limited assistance to Officer Garnbach. At the time, Cleveland police did not train their officers on how to treat a gunshot wound, nor did they provide their cars with first aid kits or any medical equipment whatsoever. Detective Lentz and an FBI special agent arrived 3 minutes and 43 seconds later. The agent was a trained combat medic and a registered paramedic, and immediately began to provide aid to Tamir. The agent and Officer Garnbach helped maintain an airway and applied pressure to Tamir's wound until the ambulance could take him to the hospital. Tamir's gunshot was catastrophic, having ruptured his inferior vena cava and deprived his body of a major blood supply. The agent recognized that Tamir needed surgery right away. Under these facts, the most helpful thing for Tamir was to get him to an operating room as quickly as possible, which is exactly what Officer Garnbach did when he summoned EMS at the first available moment. To conclude, this case is a culmination of a tragic confluence of events. A young boy who appeared to be much older than 12 years old spent hours playing at a recreation center with a toy gun that looked just like the real thing. No one who saw him doing it was willing or able to intervene and make him stop. Unfortunately, the security cameras that showed him frightening people with this toy gun were left unmonitored and unseen by any security officer. The 911 caller who notified police about Tamir told the 911 operator that Tamir might have been a juvenile and that the gun might have been fake, but that Tamir was scaring the expletive out of him. The 911 operator never told the dispatcher about the possibility that Tamir was a juvenile or the gun was a toy, which led to two responding officers to believe that a real man with a real gun was threatening innocent people's lives at a recreation center. When the officers approached Tamir, he unexpectedly moved in their direction and began pulling the gun from his waistband. The officers, who had no idea the gun was fake or that Tamir was only 12, thought he was going to pull the gun out. Here, Officer Lohman and Officer Garnbach were tragically mistaken about the key facts of this case. They didn't know until it was too late that Tamir was not a real threat to their safety or to the public's safety. But the law requires that they be judged according to what they knew at the time, and whether what they did at the time, based on what they knew, was reasonable. We have recommended to the grand jury against any criminal charges because we do not believe that any reasonable judge or jury would find criminal conduct in Officer Lohman's reaction to a suspect pulling what he thought was a gun. Nor has any viable theory of criminal conduct been offered to explain why Officer Garnbach would be criminally liable for Officer Lohman's use of deadly force. We are mindful of the profound impact that any police use of deadly force has on the community, and are acutely aware of the pain and suffering experienced by the family of a 12-year-old boy whose life was abruptly ended. But justice requires a thorough and even-handed examination of the facts and the law. In this case, there is no basis to charge a criminal offense.
Thanks very much. We will shortly have online on our website a longer version of, more detailed version of the analysis that Matt just gave you. If you've had a chance to look at that, feel free to email us with questions. We'll try to answer as many as we can before the day is out. So,
Prosecutor McGinty,
thanks
can I ask
all
you a
for
couple
coming.
questions? Zero?
Yeah.
You're not answering any questions at this hour?
Prosecutor McGinty,
Then we'll answer them all.
But I mean, can you answer any now?
Prosecutor,
answer any in
can you say
person?
anything about the
No.
Just in person?
Tamir
So we
family?
have something.
Joe, can you explain the
Reaction?
rationale for not answering any questions on a day like this? I mean, there's a
We'd be
million
happy-
questions,
we'd
and
be
they're not
happy to
answering
we'll
any of
entertain
them?
your questions.
But you
just
want
not
will you
in
answer our
person?
questions
Right.
on camera?
We give you autograph. Okay, finish.